Hey guys, my name's Albert and welcome to our Lead the Charge video series. Join me as I chat to industry experts within the EV sector as we cover topics such as fleet, carbon footprint and charging. Now sit back, relax, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have learned at least one thing that you can take away. Well, hey Alan, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you coming onto our Lead the Charge video series and, a completely different area for us when it comes to battery recycling. It's not something that we've covered before. So really appreciate you coming on. If you could just tell us, first of all, just a little bit about yourself, how you come into the world of EV, the world of battery recycling and all that fun stuff.
Thank you for inviting me to this little chat. Firstly, I would say that my relationship with lithium batteries probably started about 12 years ago. And we had my actual background is I'm a waste manager and have been in the waste management industry for 30 years. And for the last 20 years been with a waste management company called F&R Corley. And I headed up the hazardous waste division for them for the preceding sort of 18 years or so. So getting to deal with nasties on a daily basis, it's not surprising that someone came to the desk with an automotive lithium battery and said, can you help them deal with it? And that was 12 years ago. Getting to deal with fuming nitric acid for a living, thought it was nice and easy, but actually, lithium batteries are a complete brick wall in the UK. Challenge accepted. We found some early routes of where we could take the batteries to, which was into Europe, and I suppose where we are at the moment is that the original kind of sort of designs of like just finding that disposal route was then recognised probably about 7 years ago that really we ought to be on the conveyor belt of lithium battery recycling because something big is going to happen. And then my sort of role changed within the business from being one of a hazardous waste manager to the lithium director that I am now of Lithium Battery Recycling Solutions. So very brief sort of overall a sort of journey of where I've been to. The lithium side of things is an extremely important one for us now ongoing.
Yeah, it's a hot topic, isn't it, with battery recycling and what that... I mean, I didn't know anything about it until I came to visit and see your setup, and it's definitely very interesting to see. And even just from the London EV show, when I was watching the talks and the panels and just hearing what you guys are doing, it's not really something I'd thought about. You think about it, but actually the depth and the detail of what that looks like, which we'll touch on. But when it comes to like the battery recycling, what's the most exciting part about being part of battery recycling?
I think, to be fair, it's how new it is. I mean, I say 30 years served in the waste industry. There's not terribly something that's new or seismic that comes along that you can get your teeth into. I would probably say that the last time that we had something similar was something called the WE directive, which is where electrical devices and equipment, suddenly you couldn't chuck that in with the general waste. It had to be recycled, and that was a fairly seismic change. But electrification, lithium batteries, automotive change. I mean, it's all forward facing. It's always forward thinking, and it's really exciting to be part of this in its new and sort of emerging industry as such. But it's opened up some really good doors for us, talking to some real good key players in the automotive industry. To deal with EV batteries, and that is something which would have been quite a challenge to do if we were knocking on the door trying to see if we could do it in general waste and recycling. But no, EV and lithium batteries and the challenge of recycling is something that's really a hot topic for them, a high priority, and we've been able to sort of help with a few ongoing, and I find that really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing what you guys do is definitely exciting. I don't realize the amount of effort and the amount that goes into it, and the amount of things that you can actually extract and get out. Like, you hear so much about EV batteries, and one of the biggest things that you hear is, and I did hear for some time, and people used to come in to Tesla and say to us, well, what about the batteries? I hear they end up in the bottom of the ocean, or I hear that you can't recycle them, or once they're done, they're going to be piled up and there's going to be millions of these batteries. And how much of the battery can be recycled? What does that look like? And does that actually happen?
No, it's far from the truth. I think the only batteries that go into the sea are the ones that unfortunately get sunk in the in a cargo ship if there's a disaster. No, we have rules in place. There is responsibility on all battery owners as such, or manufacturers that are putting batteries onto the UK market or European market. They need to be recycled responsibly. It's just one of the many misinformation, mistruths that are abounding about at the moment. There is an awful lot of negative rhetoric in regard to EV take up. Change is obviously scary. We get that, but every day you can read and hear things in the media to actually disjoint the actual truths, and it's certainly illegal for batteries to be placed into a landfill, and most certainly illegal for it to be dumped into the ocean. There is responsibilities on battery producers to be recycling it properly and sending it to companies like ourselves.
Yeah, it's funny because you would think that that would be the case, right? I mean, common sense would say that that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that. But it's funny how that's such a misconception, and people believe that to be true. And I didn't really give it a great deal of thought, and I didn't really give the whole idea. I just used to say to people, well, they can be recycled. But is there any figures that you can give us in terms of percentages or anything like that in terms of recycling or repurposing or anything like that?
As in the recovery rate, no, we are already, upwards of 80% recovery based on a sort of a typical EV battery. And when it comes to the actual cell makeup, where we talk about a black mass, which is the coating on the anode and cathode inside the battery, we are really high with a hydrometallurgical treatment process. In excess of 96% is recovered or recoverable, and can be used.
Big number, right?
As can be used as new materials going into a new battery.
That's great. I mean, that's a massive number. 96%, being that's a huge number. It's not like it's we can recycle 20% of the battery. No, like 96% of reused. That's huge. So in terms of like the lithium battery recycling company's mission, what's kind of the goal? What's the end goal when it comes to recycling, and what you guys want to be able to do, and the difference that you guys want to be able to make?
Yeah, sure. The journey at the moment, even though we've been at it for actually quite a long period of time, it still feels like we're on the beginnings of our journey. The development of where we want to go to at the moment, the skill sets that we've actually incorporated to get to going from having a battery, discharging it, having it disassembled, mechanically separating it or shredding it so that we can get into the materials within. These are all challenges which we've done for the past couple of years to sort of learn the ups and downs of what goes on. The other side of it is that who are we using? Where is the materials going to for that final recovery? Because hydrometallurgical treatment doesn't exist in the UK. So actually the pathways of what we're working on at the moment is the pathways of what can be done with the materials. The future of that has got to be the navigation from an immature market to a mature market within the battery recycling. What I mean by that is that our routes and where we send things to is fairly fractured. The batteries are manufactured in China or Asia. They're brought in. We build battery packs from them. The batteries are then put into use, and then we use them. A company like me will do some form of recycling, get to the materials, but then the materials now have to be exported out and repurposed or refined into new materials to be then sent on somewhere else. That fractured stage is fairly complicated, fairly difficult to do, and it adds cost. A mature market, on the other hand, is where all of those things happening within the one confines of the country. We're already seeing gigafactories which are planned, Tata, JLR, among with others. They will need to have materials to be able to build these batteries from. And the challenge of doing that circular economy within the confines of the one country is definitely where our weight is going to be shifting towards.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting to see that it is as you said, fragmented, right? You're having to send things in different places. So is that looking to be more streamlined and something that's going to try and take place in one place, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is already talk of companies which are planning on hydrometallurgical treatment in the UK. One of the difficulties, though, is that these things aren't cheap. And
Yeah,
someone putting together a 50-60 million pound plant for black mass is going to want to have that battery material going in. And
yeah,
at the moment, there isn't as much battery waste as you think there is. When we haven't got thousands and thousands of tons queuing up, waiting to be
yeah.
recycled. We ourselves are riding that market at the moment. It's a real big important thing for us to sort of try and judge when the amounts of batteries are going to be reaching a critical condition where the waste industry will be stretched to be able to deal with it. At the moment, we're not. I think we're all with wide eyes. Looking at when the likelihood is when we'll have these batteries coming through and we'll be ready to process them.
An interesting thought in itself, isn't it? Because where are they going to come from? But the fact that there's not loads of it at the moment, we've got a million EVs on the road. They're eventually going to need to come through some sort of recycling process. But batteries do last longer than people think, and they are better than people think that they are. So it's a good problem to have, but it's also a problem for a business like yourself. But it's not a bad problem for the for the wider consumer.
Yeah, we're tracking perhaps the first set of cars that were on the road between 2010 and 2014. They tended
Wow.
to have the lithium batteries first. Represents about 23,000 units sold, and with a bit of calculation, we estimate around 5,000 tons of batteries within those cars. Well, those cars are still on for sale in an auto trader. There is some scrappage as such going on, but these cars are lasting longer. I mean, I watched a video even last night of a Tesla Model S 2016. It's done 430,000 miles. It's got 76% of available battery, so it's only had yes, it's got degradation, but it's still usable. And I think that's something that we need to learn. We need to understand. I mean, my own EV car, I've just done 97,000 miles in 3 years with. And actually, yes, there is a degrade in what it could do when I first had it, but it's not really that much in reality. And now that car can go on to have a second life, a third life, a fourth life, and this is the bit which we need, I suppose, more confidence with.
Yeah.
In 10 years' time, if you're looking through the auto trader looking for a second-hand car, if you had the confidence to know that these cars are just going to last, then we may in 10 years' time look back and go, why on earth are we worried about it? But at this moment,
Yeah.
we don't have that, so of course there is a lot of negativity, or there's a lot of lack of confidence in having cars where they've had a life, and could that battery fail within the first year, 2 years of ownership?
Yeah, and it's new territory, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
ground that we've not walked before, and with that becomes uncertainty, and people become fearful, and because it's a battery. Batteries can fail. I mean, I had a car that we had delivered to a customer, brand new performance Model 3, and it failed after like 1 mile. Like he'd driven it off his drive, drove it up the road, and the battery failed. It can happen. Is it something that's likely and happens often? No, absolutely not. We put a new one in. He was good, and he was on his way again. But batteries can go for a long time. But eventually, those batteries that are out there, the million cars on the road, and the ones that are slowly and are coming, there's going to be a lot out there. On that, batteries aren't the same as they were in the 2010 cars. So I'd imagine the battery recycling process for you guys is ever changing and ever adapting. And that's what's
Yes.
that like with
Yeah.
dealing with that?
To a degree. I think when it comes to the current crop of batteries and what are and how they're made, there's not a massive amount of change in the formats. For over the past 10, 15 years. Certainly, the changes are within the materials used. And with the performance of the batteries, you've only got to take a Nissan Leaf and realise that the Gen 1 and Gen 2 is an inferior battery. to the threes and the fours. In the same battery footprint, in the same space the battery takes up in the car. We're dealing with something which is far more superior with the later models and can do more mileage because there's more kilowatt hours in there. The battery technology changes. In regards to materials, on the other hand, we're seeing development within the chemistry of the build of the batteries. And that is going to be developing ongoing. We will certainly see the technology increase to have batteries with more energy density, safe to work with, less costly to make, and this is the main race. I would say there is over the past 3-4 years more of a migration over to LFP batteries which don't have cobalt and nickel in them, which is great from a manufacturing point of view in regards to less cost to make them, but on the other hand it's more of a challenge on the recycling side because of course those valuable minerals are then no longer present. Right. The challenge of LFP and the recycling point is down to lithium, which is just far more abundant. So most of the hydromet facilities that we're dealing with are actually turned off by lithium iron phosphate or even as additional cost because of that reason alone.
Interesting. I mean, it's a whole world that is just. I mean, I don't really know. I know how the batteries work. I don't know the ins and the outs of the. So it's really interesting, which is why we do this, so people can have a better understanding as to, because an EV is so different to a normal car, and I think that's where so many people go wrong. They just see it as a different fuel type, when actually it's far more than that. Far more than different fuel type. Far much more goes into it. So just on that, then, you briefly touched on this question, but what's the biggest challenge that the battery recycling is facing at the moment?
I would say, I can only obviously comment on my, on our view as such.
Sure,
but
yeah.
I think there is a big question in regards to scale. How we can, do a recycling and recovery process at a greater scale than what we've got at the moment. Doing the discharge, doing the disassembly of batteries at the moment is pretty manual. So we've got full-time engineers, HV engineers to do that process. And my two guys, which are full-time on it as such, can do up to 4 fairly large big BEV packs a day. But what happens when I want to do 40 batteries a day? I'm going 10 times the amount of staff, and I think it's that we're going to have a challenge of moving from we're at a commercial scale, but actually where we're going to go from here to satisfy the needs of really high volumes coming through when we do reach a critical volume from an end of life in maybe 5 to 10 years time, when all of these cars are going to start trickling through as retired, as not wanted anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's even one of the things you said about discharging, another thing you just don't think of, like when I came to see you, it was really interesting to know that, well, when a battery's at 0% and the car can no longer go, there's still energy in that battery, and it's still dangerous to handle that battery because there's correct me if I'm wrong, there's deadly power still in that battery, right?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you've got a car which is showing 0% on the dash, that's there is cushions built into the batteries. So people are doing road tests where they get to 0%, and they're still managing to get probably 10 miles out. There seems to be a little bit of reserve in there. But we're dealing with batteries which 400, 800 volt powertrains. And in the short, the long and the short of it is that when you take the tops off these batteries, if you've got power in them, you're dealing with such high voltage, and it's DC voltage as well. You touch the wrong place, you're going to die. So yes, they are pretty dangerous to deal with. But we go beyond the BMS protection. We go beyond that 0% that the car may talk about. We actually discharge to a proper 0%. So that we're killing off the energy inside the battery.
Is that quite a lengthy process?
It's to be fair. I mean, our discharge capability is growing. But say one of our 30 kilowatt units, it can discharge a 90 kilowatt battery in 3 hours. It's just simple, physics and maths as such. So, but we don't know how much energy is in the batteries for sure when they come to us as a waste. That's the thing that's a little bit unknown. So some batteries may come to us and they're 20-30% charged up, in which case we're only really sort of talking of less than an hour to discharge it. But then we've got others which could be 100%. Typically speaking, I would say that's rare because the batteries that we're dealing with are failed ones. So they're ones which are either broke or they're not working. So they're not going to have that a fully charged cycle before they come to us.
So you're able to break down a battery, recycle it, break it down into components. But when it comes to discharging a battery, are you able to recycle that energy, reuse that energy when you're discharging it, or is it wasted?
No, we have a way of harvesting the energy. So the energy is actually taken from the batteries. It's fed into our bidirectional power supplies, which is on our side of the meter. And then we're able to harvest the energy. So it actually feeds into our building, into the electric car chargers that we've got outside. And when we're running the plant as such, it's fairly rewarding to see the plant running with the aid of battery waste electricity essentially, and it's a nice byproduct to have, but actually it's extremely necessary for us because our mechanical separation or the shredding stage needs to have the batteries completely dead before we're able to shred. So harvesting the energy is a good thing. There are other techniques that you can do to mitigate it, but our viewpoint is that there's an awful lot of energy there to benefit from, and it would be an extreme waste to not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's so good that you're able to use that and repurpose that energy because, as you said, it just becomes wasted, and it's good to be able to reuse that and recycle that as well. So we have also briefly touched on this, but in terms of as the EV industry is growing, as we're getting more and more cars on the road, as more and more batteries will start to come through battery recycling over the next 5-10 years, where do you see the battery recycling? I said we briefly touched on it, but this battery recycling sector evolving, how do you see it changing?
I think there's likely to be more activity. There's going to be more businesses coming into it. I mean, at this moment in time, there is only a set amount of batteries that are available in the UK right now. And with the advent of end-of-life batteries, we're going to see, the term that gets commonly thrown about is a tsunami of batteries. But the tap will be undone when we start to see those first sort of cars that were on the roads 15 years ago. Now starting to be retired, and no one cares about them. They're just going to go and fall off the end as such. Yeah. And in that respect, we're going to see a migration of dealing with 5,000 tons of batteries to the full force of 340,000 batteries, which are on the roads right now. One day they're going to come on. They're going to come on and be a waste to deal with. Now it could be that there is a through Second Life there could be sort of repurposing and made. Certainly that's one journey, but actually the demand on materials, the demand on minerals to be able to make new batteries, and certain laws being due to come in. There's a rewrite of the European Battery Directive, which is going to insist on recycled materials actually being used to make new batteries, and that advent is going to put big demands, and supply is going to want to probably meet those demands. So there's going to be more competition. If we're dealing with hundreds of thousands of tons of batteries, then we're going to need that capacity in the UK to deal with it. So all of the work we're doing currently is with that foresight in dealing with the UK battery market and being an answer to it. So in the next few years as such, it's going to show expansion of where we are, into newer facilities to be able to serve across the UK.
I mean, that's awesome. But like in terms of, we spoke about breaking the batteries down. sorry, just going back slightly, breaking the battery down and shredding it into all these components. And you talk about the black mass and, with the discharging the black mass and all that kind of stuff. When you talk about repurposing, are we reusing the batteries for other cars, or are they being reused for other forms of battery storage? Or like when it's repurposing, what does it actually look like?
Well, it's kind of a bit of both, and in fact, there's the terms to use is repurpose, but also reuse. And when it comes to the second life market as such, again, this is highlighted in the new battery directive as such. When you're dealing with something that's reused, it conjures up the image that we're going to have a battery, but it's going to be serving itself in what it was designed to do. So if you've got some battery modules that were from a Nissan Leaf, then you could put it into another Nissan Leaf battery that was broken,
Right.
needed repair, and you could make something new again. Or make something whole again to work. The repurposing side is, kind of where it says where you've got a battery where you're now going to change its use. And some of the common themes on that is power storage. So when
Right.
you've got
Yeah.
a battery which may be not so good for traction batteries, when it comes to making a car go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds or whatever, it takes an awful lot of power. The power
Yeah.
demand of that battery is quite high. Mentioned about the Model S earlier. It's cited that when you've got a traction battery which is 70%, state of health, which means that when it was new, say it could do 200 miles and now it can only do 140. That may not be good for the car, but it could be used for power storage, which is far less demanding on the battery itself. But I have my feelings on it. I think that repurposing has its own challenges in as much as the battery has been tested to be in a car, and the regulation needs to catch up. You can't just have someone take a car battery and plumb it into home electrics and hope it's going to work. I can foresee some challenge, and of course you've only got to go on YouTube to have a look at all of the people that convert camper vans or cars, or there's quite a lot of activity, independent activity of people playing around with things which could lead to be dangerous. I think there's a timescale with repurposing. The technology of batteries are changing so fast as such, that
Yeah.
are we going to be messing around in the 2030s with a mid 2010 car battery? In the 2030s, the battery technology may be that far better than what we're dealing with at the moment, that it's just not worth it. But the one thing that is in
Yeah.
those batteries is materials and minerals that we're going to need and want to recover. So yeah, I think there's room always for repurposing and reuse, but perhaps it's not the magic answer that most people are saying.
Seems to me there's just so much that goes into it. Like it's such a big project to recycle a battery and or reuse or repurpose. It seems like and there's so many avenues. It's really interesting. I only had to stand at your stall for 5 minutes to be absolutely mesmerised by what you do, not understanding any of it, but just to see what goes into it and what all the different components and trying to wrap your head around it. I
Yeah,
was
no,
so blown away.
yeah, I see it as an education piece because
Mm.
likewise, I mean, 30 years served in the waste industry. People think about wheelie bins and stuff like that, which is where I started, and here I am talking, about lithium batteries, which is a fairly niche, waste stream, fairly
Yeah, for
niche thing
sure.
to deal with, and we're trying to pioneer those ways forwards with the materials and what you can do with the batteries. So, and most people know about lithium battery these days, but actually they don't know and understand about the recycling challenges. So yeah, for us, it's extremely important to sort of share the message out, to sort of show that this is what can be done, and to stop all those mistruths about batteries being thrown in landfills or in the sea, as you say.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, we do like a myth busting series for that reason. Because there's so many, not just even on battery recycling, just EVs in general, anything to do with EVs. There's so much bad rep and there's so many misconceptions that we do a myth busting series for that reason, to kind of debunk those myths and actually say to people, this is not what's happening. And I've heard it so many times. I'll never buy an EV because it'll end up in the bottom of the ocean. So yeah, really, really appreciate that. And just explaining that, and it would take me a long time to probably wrap my head around the whole ins and the outs. But it's definitely good to hear what that looks like, and to see where it's going to go as well. Because as you say, you're at the very beginning stages, and in 10, 20, 30 years time, when every single car on the road is EV, when battery technology is evolving as quick as the other technology that we have in the world, which is rapidly evolving, it's going to be ever changing, and there's going to be so many, and it's going to be a massive area. And for you to be at the beginning of that and seeing it from the beginning is super exciting. You've probably seen a lot of change already, and the change that you're probably foreseeing is probably huge.
No, absolutely. No, the conversation. I think I'm on my 4th year running where I've said that the conversations that I had last year are completely different to the ones I'm having this year. So and that is set to go on. So, I mean, we as a company ourselves, we've just had a buyout. Actually, we've just been acquired by a much larger corporate called Suez. And they've got designs of a battery recycling now in France, actually fairly nearby in Dunkirk. So, being a UK arm of something like that is certainly going to be really exciting moving forwards, because we'll have an ability to do recycling and the hydromet process internally, as well as all of the other relationships that we've been generating as such for the past 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, and being in the position that you're in, you're really able to lead from the front in that, and be able to see that evolve. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I just have some questions, just more on EVs as well. If you know someone who's going into purchase an EV, or someone who's thinking about moving to EV, what advice would you give to that person? Someone who's thinking to get their first EV or moving into this space.
I think the first bit of advice is to stop reading social media. Go on to owners forums, go on to owners Facebook groups, or go on to someone that's actually got EVs. I think it's fairly rare to have or get to someone who's had the experience of EV and then is going back.
It is. Yeah, you're right.
I think I've only got to have a look at my own sort of journey, and I'm not an evangelist by any shape or means. I've got a very nice petrol bike in a motorbike in the garage, and that's going to stay with me forever. But the upshot of it is that EVs are down to your situation at home, how you can manage with it. Now, I am a business user. I've been driving company cars since I was 22. Most of them turbo diesels. As far as the change for me, I do some fairly high mileage on sort of 35,000 miles plus per year. So I get about a bit, and with an EV, I was filled with range anxiety. Is it going to work? Is it is it going to fit? Am I going to struggle with with an EV over a diesel? Now I have a Tesla. That makes life easier because they've got the supercharger networks. I'm able to charge at home, and again that is a fairly big plus. But I'm able to charge at work because we've got the recouping and the harvesting of waste energy here. But the upshot of it is that not many people have got that same scenario. I think it's about 30-40% of the English homes don't have a driveway or some way to be able to go and sort of do parking and then charging. But there are answers. There is more and more charging points being sort of made, and I think there's more businesses as well which are opening up. There's not too many businesses that don't have chargers outside. So the support of being able to do this sort of top-up charging as such is great, and not everybody does 35,000 miles like me. Someone who's doing far less than me, an average of 10,000 miles, probably could get by with what charges you could get in the town, at work, at the supermarket, and the like. So the demands would meet the use in that respect, but there is still an awful lot that needs to be done with that.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. I totally agree. I mean, I say to people, there's a lot more chargers than you think, but we need a lot more.
Yeah.
And it's funny as well because I say to people as well, if you buy a new car and you don't ever see that car, and then you start driving that car, and next thing you know, everyone's got that car. And I feel like it's similar with the EV chargers. Until you need an EV charger, you don't actually realise how many are actually out.
Yeah, no, there is. Yeah. They're in most motorway services up and down. So for a long journey,
Yeah, for sure.
they could work. I mean, I did a driving holiday last year in Scotland, and the most northerly supercharger for Tesla is Inverness. And actually, Inverness isn't really that high up. There is still quite an awful lot of Scottish countryside, above that.
Yeah.
But Scotland has got a network called Charge Place Scotland, and most villages, most tourist locations have got chargers available on that network, and it really does very well. I mean, we did sort of 1,700 miles going around Scotland, and not once did I feel fear that away from the Tesla network, I didn't have the support of being able to charge the car. But charging is one side. The other side is ownership, general ownership of the car. Now, my previous cars, and the mileage that I do, I would have been in the garage at least once a year, for servicing. Look, oil, coolant, brake fluids, and all the kind of thing. With electric cars, with less moving parts, I can say that the total amount of maintenance that my car has cost is just over £400 in 3 years. And I'm not counting tyres there, but things that went wrong with it or needed to be fixed. And two of those, and one of them was, the majority of that actually was some suspension linkages, which have just were creaking about a couple of months back. So they just needed to be sort of fixed. But apart from that, there's been zero. There is no service, to look at as such. Even the brake discs.
I mean, it's wholly different, isn't it?
Yeah, the brake discs and the pads, they're still pretty fresh because with regenerative braking, you don't get to use them. Things do last longer in the car. So I think my car's in great condition for what it is. 97,000 miles, and it'll make a great second-hand car now for a second life. And it's still within its 120,000 mile battery warranty from Tesla. So, there is still some backup there eventually.
Yeah, for sure. And then in terms of your world, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to join the world of battery recycling, such a niche space, but someone who's interested in that, is passionate about that? What advice would you give to that person?
Go for it. I mean, the upshot of it is that we are at a fairly crucial point. I think in the next few years we're going to start to see demand building up. There is a great array of skill sets needed in regards to lithium battery recycling. I mean, not least to the fact that we're still trying to pioneer and find out what the best way is to recycle a battery. We've got our ways. Other companies have got different ones. We haven't truly found the pinnacle of like this is the best way going forwards. There's a lot of research and development that's needed for that. EV cars especially, moving up to a scale up. You mentioned it earlier. There's a lot of work that's being done with robotics and automation, and could that be an answer? Code bots is one of the latest things I heard about. So in other words, could we have appendages or something that could help a person move big heavy things around? So it's like not a robot, but something that could help a person. We've got all of that to look forward to. In regards to high voltage, dealing with the mechanics side, I mean, lithium battery recycling is a far cry to the rest of the recycling industry, because there is some fairly niche skill sets you're going to need. High voltage training, there's training involved. Now we're dealing with cars, not just in my sector as such, but batteries not just in my sector, but actually for the cars themselves. All of these scrap yards or end of life vehicle recycling plants are going to be dealing with high voltage, taking these batteries apart. And the skill sets are going to be needed. There's going to be an awful lot more requirement to deal with these batteries in these controlled and competent ways. So and
it is a skill set, as you said.
And Further to that, you've got the chemistry of the batteries. Again, we've got pyrometallurgical treatment, we've got hydrometallurgical treatment, but this is the current crop of what we're dealing with. How we actually recover and recycle the batteries and get the materials to be separated. All of that, from a chemistry point of view, is a big attractant for research and development. So yeah, we're not finished, and the advice is that someone's interested in going into the industry as such. I think that you're going to be facing something that's quite buoyant, challenging, and very necessary ongoing. So lots of opportunity out there.
Yeah, amazing, awesome. I'm going to finish with one last question, and it's probably a mixture of everything we've spoken about, but kind of more in a more focused. Why is battery recycling so important?
Because there's no choice.
I love that.
There we are. It's important. It's not important. It's absolutely necessary. Battery recycling is going to secure our feedstocks of minerals, our understanding of electrification ongoing as we move from fossil fuels to something which can benefit from renewable energy. We're heading towards our targets for CO2. We're in as enlightened a position as we've ever been as a society and a human race. We understand that we damage the planet. We understand that all of our actions right here. Yes, they may not be revealed as being a problem now, but our sons and our grandsons and their sons and grandsons, they're the ones that are going to be affected. The other side of it is that we simply just don't have enough resource under the ground to satisfy every single person on the planet for electrification. And you need to have this sustainability. You need to have something which is on the market, can be used, can be torn back down again, can be put back in to be made into new materials. That circular economy, that sustainability, is what is going to be our success. And there isn't any choice, because the only other alternative is it gets burnt or gets put into a hole in the ground, and then we're going to have a problem because we won't have these materials ongoing.
There's no better way to finish it. Really, it's absolutely necessary, and you're right. It is necessary, and it's really important. And it's important that people understand why it's important, and it's important that people understand that it's actually happening. It's not this myth. It's not this thing that's in the future. It's happening now, and it's not 20% of the battery. It's a significant number, and it's having a massive impact and a positive impact. So, look, we really, really appreciate you coming on. It's a whole new area for us to cover. It's something that I get questioned about a lot. What about the battery recycling? And I'm only able to give some information, minimal information. So it'd be good for people to actually hear a bit more about it. I'm sure we could have gone on for hours, because what you do is massively in depth. There's lots and lots of things you could cover. As I said, seeing your stall and seeing what you guys do, your stand, at these shows, and coming to your battery recycling center, it's huge. It's massive, and it's trying to wrap your head around what you guys are doing is great. So really, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you for your time.
That's my pleasure.
I can't wait for people to hear it.
No, that's fine. I think, I suppose what would be good is to point people to our website if they do have any questions.
Yeah, we definitely will.
lithiumbatteryrecycling.co.uk. And as I say, it's an education piece. I'm here to talk about what we're doing here, while we're building the business as such, and actually explaining what's going on. And it's important because if the negative rhetoric on battery recycling and it just gets dumped in a hole in the ground goes away, it's just one less thing or one less barrier for people to adopt EV and electrification, which is going to be one of our important moves in the upcoming decades.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, and we really appreciate you joining us. I can't wait for people to hear it.
No problem, Albert.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you.
All the best.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.